Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to the Accelerator Podcast, giving you practical and tactical tools to bridge the military and civilian gap. I'm one of your hosts, Michael Pett, along with Emily Grandinetta. Today, we're going to be discussing another aspect of the military civilian divide and why it harms vets and employers alike. Em?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so this is a big topic. But what basically like I'm so amazed at what I'm seeing having been out of this work for 10 years. I was very heavily like 100% into the veteran employment stuff back when I wrote my first book 2012. Um and then I stepped away for a while, and yet things have just not progressed. And we've talked a little bit about that. How like I thought, oh wow, all the transition issues that I was aware of like will have been fixed by now. Maybe because everybody read the first book, field tested, but no, it's they're still out there. And so one of the things though that's really different from when I was first doing this is back in 2010, 2012, like we had all these service members coming back from conflict, and all the companies were like waving a flag saying, we're going to hire thousands of veterans. And I was kind of on the sidelines saying, well, okay, so you need to prepare yourself and you need to know how to make them successful and how to accelerate their learning so that you can protect that investment and be a good story for everyone. But now what I'm hearing, because I've been the whole summer speaking at conferences, so I've been hearing a lot from the market, different aspects of the market. What I'm hearing now is that employers are actually a little more reluctant to hire veterans. And that surprised me. Um, I mean, okay, so all that patriotism has kind of faded away because there's not been a big event, thank God, to make us all rise up. Um, but now there are all these concerns and stereotypes at work about veterans have PTSD. Okay, really? Or veterans don't stay. They churn through jobs and they quit. So why would we want to invest in hiring?
Right.
But I don't know what are you hearing about that?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things, and right, you're right. I'm hearing very similar, notes and feedback from employers, right? Because a lot of my daily work is talking to D&I teams, talent acquisition teams, corporate social responsibility teams at big tech organizations, right? And one of the things that I think it's imperative that the veteran, the current service member, the mil spouse, anybody tuning in listens and is listening knows that 12, 14 years ago, when this initiative was at its height, right? A lot of the dollars doled out were coming from D&I teams, coming from talent acquisition teams. And because of the way the current administration is regarding D&I, a lot of organizations have scaled back on not just funding these programs, but driving and building these programs. I saw it, myself at Uber, right? As the writing was on the wall that Harris was going to lose and that Trump was going to regain the House. Um, a lot of DNI's programming was absolutely being changed. Now, when it comes down to the attrition challenges, right? You and I have been on the side of coaching, on the side of building for a very long time. And I would argue that because they've come out of the post-COVID world, where non-revenue generating positions were the first things eliminated, okay? The ability to build a program where they could help out with those attrition challenges were probably also sidelined. So I think that might speak to this piece that they're part of this revolving door.
Yeah, and can you just say for those members of our
Mhm.
listening audience who may not be familiar with that term non-revenue generating positions, what
Yeah.
can you just like say what that means?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So basically, if you think about it, like we'll go with consulting and tech, right? So consulting, that's your advisement folks, right? These are people that are having billable, chargeable hours, right? They're going out to the client, they're receiving a fee for ultimately providing goods and services. On the tech side, it could be anything from an engineer to a product manager, right, to your sales teams. But non-revenue generating would be more like operations, talent acquisition, human resources, right? People ops. So basically, the employees taking care of the employee population are not generating revenue, but yet they are so critical to the life, right, and to the heartbeat of those organizations. But most of those folks were impacted.
Yeah, so they enable all the people who
Hmm.
are client facing
There you
or
go.
market facing. They are the kind of the machine behind the curtain
Yep.
that makes all that work, right? And
Mhm.
so you're right. When the economy is down or jobs are, are down, those are those non-revenue generating positions are the first to go.
Yep.
Um,
Absolutely.
and so there, by extension, the positions that they're hiring for right now tend to be probably more of those revenue generating positions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And what big organizations will do, and you and I have seen this before, for the non-generating roles or even some of the revenue generating roles, if they're a global org, they're going to ship those offshore. Because right
Mm,
now we're in a bit of a weird situation economically and
yeah.
geopolitically where we've got potential tariffs that are impacting businesses, right? That's
Yeah.
a challenge. Right. And if you're wearing the uniform, this is the last thing you're thinking about. But
Yeah.
this is really what impacts big business. So where one organization might have 2,000 open positions, globally or maybe even domestically here, now they might only have 150, and the rest might be in some other geography, right? To
Yeah.
where the community isn't going to be.
Right. Right. So what you're talking about now is a lot of the kind of environmental or economic, like social reasons um, for the climate we're in, where companies are pulling back on hiring. So so in a lot of the conversations I have day to day, I'm talking with veteran advocate organizations or, state level um, job center counselor, the people who are on the ground working with veterans. And what's really interesting to me that I'm hearing from them are like these areas of resistance from employers that aren't driven by those external economic factors. They're these stereotypes about PTSD or about job churn. Now the job churn is not really a stereotype. I mean, the data's there. Veterans do leave jobs at a much higher frequency than non-veterans. So that is an issue, and that's something that, of course, you and I talk about all the time, and that we are trying to solve for in our domains outside of this podcast. But what was really interesting, and I'm going to blow your mind, I think, blow your mind with this one. What I've been hearing a lot of from those veteran advocates or veteran outreach professionals who are themselves almost always veterans is that it's almost like they're out there trying to convince employers to hire veterans, and so that was puzzling to me. And so that's when I started probing, asking a lot of questions about, well, why is that? Why are you in that position of having to convince? And they don't necessarily recognize it as that, but what they said to me, I said, well, give me an example, play it out for me, like play it out for me. Let's pretend I'm an employer and you're a veteran advocate and we've got an appointment and you're coming to my company and we're going to have a conversation about hiring veterans. um Here's what I hear from you. I hear from you, veterans expect X, Y, and Z. Veterans are trained for X, Y, and Z. And you just, employer, you just need to change the way you do X, Y, and Z so that it looks more like that. So then they're more comfortable with it, etc. And I'm sitting here thinking, I don't have to change anything for anybody, and that's just going to add cost. And what you've just done as the advocate speaking to me is you've raised the bar to entry. You've made it harder for me to hire veterans because now you're telling me all the things I have to do differently in my organization. I just need to get these positions filled, get them billable or generating revenue or whatever it is they're doing. And after a few days with a big group of these people hearing that, I'm like, that is just the worst sales pitch ever. Like, that is the worst sales pitch ever. So I just want to hear your point of view on that.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It does blow my mind, right? And it bothers me a little bit because I think that's where the communications gaps lie, right? Is It's one thing to be a veteran trying to help veterans, right? We appreciate it. You understand. You have commonalities, similar backgrounds, and they can feel safe, right? But if you yourself has never entered the corporate workforce, then technically you should not necessarily be advising that human being, right? I'll give you a specific example, right? McDonald's, right? Worth about $245 billion. Okay. Now, Emily, if I were to tell you that I'm going to leave to go work at McDonald's, you'd be probably like, congratulations. It's a wonderful organization, a great company. I'm sure you're going to hire a lot of veterans there. But if I were to tell John Veteran that you should try and work at McDonald's, they are going to think that they're going to be flipping burgers and making French fries. And not that there's anything wrong with those positions, because I like French fries, okay? And we need people to make them. But at the end of the day, there's a fundamental gap in the way we perceive, right? What is actually available to us. And if the veterans, are only receiving a small element of what is out there for them, they're going to think that's the gospel. And that's where you and I come in and really drive that change, right? And that's just one small, silly example, but I think it's right on the nose.
Yeah, I mean, in our accelerated military transition program, we have a whole module that's just about understanding the organizational context and how that impacts culture and mission and behavior and success and performance, and how different it is outside of the military than it is in the military. Nobody tells anybody any of that. But you need to know that to really understand, okay, if McDonald's is hiring, they're probably hiring at their size and scale, they're hiring every type of professional. I mean, they probably hire in 300 different job categories, I would think. You know what I mean? It's not just flipping burgers, that's what we see, but remember what we talked about, these non revenue generating positions are all often behind the scenes. But the thing that I think is a fundamental flaw that this is happening is that the people who are, and maybe we're saying the same thing, but the people who are out there trying to convince employers to hire veterans are actually making it harder. And I don't think they realize that because they so much come from the position of the veteran. Well, look, here's how veterans, you know, I, so the problem there is, okay, veterans need to be readier to join a civilian company than they are when they get out. And that's what we're trying to do. That's what my company is trying to do. We're trying to close that gap because no one else is doing it. The employing organization, the hiring organization isn't doing it. The military isn't doing it. So the veteran comes into the market with all these wild ideas based on what they've been told or what they can figure out for themselves. And that then leads to all of the issues that create that job churn and underemployment and all the things that we're trying to fix. But I just feel the sense of urgency to skill up those folks because I'm not saying don't hire veterans for those advocacy roles. They're the best people to be in those roles, but we got to train them right.
But I'll take it one step further to you because you brought up something a minute ago that I think it's imperative we expand on, right? When you got into the space, when you wrote field tested, going on 12 years ago, right? Um, Patriotism was at an all-time high, right? Everybody was waving the flag, and you know what they said? I don't give a shit what that person's background is. Let's hire them. We'll bring them in. We'll upskill them. We'll do the OJT or on-the-job training here and then we'll get them ready to go out, right? We multiple administrations later, right? The wars are behind us, right? People are not enlisting as often as they did, and no one is deploying as much. So that's going to dispel those PTSD myths over time,
I
right?
hope so.
But I do too. But as we think about as people separate, that has not changed. SFL TAP is still a damn train wreck, right? They're not really giving them the appropriate understanding of what it takes to join a job, how to interview for a job, what your resume should look like. But the organizations think that because we've done this for 12 years now, they think that the military is going to catch up, right? And that's not the case. We were talking about, right? We were talking about this earlier too, right? The military mindset. When you enlist or when you commission, you go into a TRADOC environment, right? If you pass height and weight, if you have a specific aptitude or a degree, right, they will send you down to a school and you will become trained in that role. And then you will go off and execute that in the military. For whatever reason, the military thinks that because they've got this one school or two schools under their belt, that they can do anything in the civilian world. Well, it just doesn't fucking work that way. Okay. And I'm going to tell you why. Because if you join as an infantryman, okay, yes, we need those. All right. And then you exit the infantry and you somehow got your degree while serving and you want to go off and be a software engineer. Well, guess what? There's a fundamental skill gap there. And for whatever reason, the DoD is not explaining that to these people. And they're getting pissed off. And employers are getting pissed off that they're getting unqualified talent. Whereas if they would just take the time to either speak with us or listen in, or take advantage of one of the many VSOs that are out there, they will understand how to get into that respective application process appropriately. But there's still a lot of gaps that we've got to work on.
I mean, I think there's also, as in any market, there's self interest. So just like from the recruiter's standpoint, the corporate recruiter standpoint, the metric their performance is measured on is how many and how quickly they fill slots, right? So their interest is in pitching a position, right? I mean, of course they want to fill it with the right person, but they're driven by desire to close out that job rec, right? Whereas the veteran is believing what they're saying, and what are any job candidate, right? We have to listen carefully and ask a lot of questions to get to what is really going to help us make a good informed decision about employment. Um, so veteran job candidates recognize the recruiter means well. The recruiter, many recruiters, they know the importance at this point. They know the importance of giving you a better sense of kind of what to expect. And they also need to fill that rec. And if it's too hard to fill it with you because you just don't get it, which of course, how could you? And that's why the accelerated program exists, to try to, nobody else is doing it, so we're doing it. We're gonna give you the information you need to be successful. So um, so
Here's
that yeah.
another fact that's going to actually kind of hurt a lot of folks that are listening is that people aren't staying in as long. They're not doing the 20 years. They're getting out. There's not really a deployment to go on to. So a lot of people are getting out early. That's lower enlisted. Those are people are generally limited with education, right? And their career opportunities are going to be far less, right? So as we think about it, the least educated, the youngest of the population are the ones that are falling prey to these challenges.
I
All
mean,
the more reason why.
yeah, I hear what you're saying, Mike, and I always come from the employer side because I spent my career in corporate in addition to being a behavioral scientist uh, with expertise in this area of the psychosocial aspects of military transition. But from an employer standpoint, you know, most of the available talent coming out of the military is enlisted because most people in the military are enlisted. Most of them are not commissioned officers, right?
83% is enlisted. Yeah.
Right. And so as an employer, it's the same thing. Most of my jobs are not leadership jobs. Most of my jobs are for doers, people who are able to get the work done, right? And a small portion of the people that I'm hiring are for leadership roles, right? So I think something I'd really like you to dig into just a little bit more is what you started to say about TRADOC,
Mhm.
is that for all of those enlisted folks, anybody coming out of the military um, needs to recognize the that civilian organizations don't hire someone so that they can put them into training so that they can learn to do their job, right? You
Yeah.
need to be able to do your job and speak to that, right? So that's one of those many expectations that's just fundamentally flawed. So can you set us straight?
Yeah, absolutely. So this isn't the 1950s, okay? Post World War II, where you,
In some
where,
ways.
where you'd walk down to the to the shop, and you'd have your briefcase with you, and you'd go speak to somebody's secretary and say, you know what, I'm here to speak to Jim, and I guarantee you I'm the most qualified applicant Jim's seen in years, because I'm a go-getter, right? And then they'd give you the job. It doesn't work that way anymore, because profitable organizations have a top and bottom line, right? When they open up the rec, right, or head count, that budget is allocated. Okay. That budget is allocated, and that recruiter's clock starts. Okay. And they have a time to fill. They have a time to fill. And the shorter the time to fill, right, the more people you can get hired, right? Which means you can hire less people.
Yeah, so that can I just say the reason for those of you who aren't coming from a corporate environment, for the reason why that time to fill is important is A, so the shorter the time to fill, as Mike said, the more positions you can fill. And the recruiter is rewarded for the number of positions. Therefore, they're incentivized to reduce that time to hire.
Absolutely.
Okay. So they're looking for the right person. They're not looking for the wrong person who they might be able to get to be right. They're looking for as close to someone who could come in and day one start contributing to the organization, right? And so just by virtue of being a veteran, yes, you're a little bit behind that curve, but we're working daily to try to resolve that for you.
Absolutely. And of course, there's intangibles that come from being in the military that any organization is going to adore. Okay, I'm not saying that, your entire skill set is useless by any means. That's not what I'm saying here. What I'm getting at, though, is that these profitable, publicly traded global organizations do not have the capacity to remove their employees from their day job, to train you, right, 6 months to a year, to get you up to speed, so that way you can begin assisting with driving revenue, right? Now, yes, there is a ramp period. There's an onboarding process. You're going to make sure that you can talk to your boss or talk to your team to make sure, this looks right, smells right, and tastes right. But at the end of the day, you have to come in already pretty much able to do everything that role requires. Okay. Whereas TRADOC in the military would give you the FMs, the TMs, the SOPs, right? And show you from day one to week 12 how to do your job. They do not have the ability to do that. TRADOC is a training environment, and no corporate entity has something so robust to where they can do that.
And I'm so glad that we're talking about this because that is a major sticking point for a lot of veterans who come into the civilian workforce and they see that and they see chaos and they see lack of organization and most of all they see lack of leadership. What is going on in this crazy place? Nothing's written. There's no documentation, no SOPs, etc. Meanwhile, the organization is looking at you saying, well, you're a professional. You've done this in the military. Why do you need SOPs? Why do you need to be told everything that you have to do? Like, that's another negative stereotype you know, that civilian employers often have is that veterans need micromanagement, which couldn't be further from the truth. And I've been trying to diffuse that one for decades. But I
And a
think
lot,
that,
yeah, and that's going to be another episode, because then I'm going to bring in imposter phenomenon or imposter syndrome, and that could lead to what reasons why they'd be reluctant to raise their hand. But yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah,
yeah.
I got a whole thing about that too.
All right, so let's make a note of that for a future episode. But one thing I wanted to say is so we've just set up a problem without a solution, which is that employers want people who can perform and deliver, start adding value from day one. Veterans can't be that because there's a huge learning gap that they don't even know they have. And I think employers kind of know that they have it, and some of them do a better job of accelerating that process than others. Most don't. Usually what happens is the veteran comes in and they're like, I thought I was going to be able to add value. I thought I was hired because of what I did in the military, but now I'm here. They won't let me do it. Well, why wouldn't they let you do it? Because there's tremendous risk of letting you do it until they have established for themselves that you can do it. Just because you are the go-to guy over here, it is kind of like starting over, and everyone will say that. But but it's not a problem without a solution. The solution is the veteran has to be very open and able to learn as much as possible as fast as possible. And this is what we talk about when we talk about the military transition framework, which we'll talk more about in future episodes. But that's a stage model that says the military transition has stages and you have to go through each stage in order to kind of be done with it and learn all the things you need to learn. The first stage is characterized by resistance. That's why we have veterans coming into organizations saying, well, where's the leadership? And this isn't wrong. And I've got to roll up my sleeves. I'm going to fix this and get the place into shape. And everyone else is like, hello, we were here before you. We're going to be here after you. We've talked about that. But the problem with that resistance is that it prevents learning. And the most important thing when you land a job, and this is for anyone, not just a veteran, but especially for a veteran, is you've got to be ready to unlearn some things and relearn a lot of things. And if you're resistant, you're not going to learn. You're going to be pushing back and making everything wrong, right? And so that's the solution, is to help veterans recognize not to be so surprised by the learning curve, but to expect and to be ready for it and to be ready to be a beginner mentally in that in the mindset. It's kind of like, dudes, like, do you think you could have been successful in the military without going through basic training? Probably not. You would have failed like in the first hour, right? Well, and you went through basic training and it sucked, and you got, look at where you are now, right? So it's kind of going to be the same process for you. You're going to have to go through that, some of that basic training, not because you don't know how to do the job that you were hired, but because you don't know how they do it there. You don't know what good looks like there. And yeah, so I mean, we've kind of been around this topic, but I think at the end of the day, just to bring it back around, um, anyone who's in a position to be advocating with potential employers of veterans needs to be able to see that whole proposition from the point of view of the employer. And right now, I don't see enough of that. Even like just looking at all of the things, all the VSOs you mentioned, and all the stuff that they're putting out online that I see, it's like, okay, I get it. I get it. I get it. But they're not going to get it. Stop telling that story. Start telling their story.
Absolutely. You know, and just to beat the drum a little bit louder, right? You know, once again, we appreciate what they're attempting to do.
Very much.
We do, right? However, without understanding how that organization operates, what they do, right, what their processes look like, you can't really speak for that organization. If you connect them to somebody inside that organization that is an ally, connect them to somebody that does come from maybe an armed forces background, that would pay so much more dividends than
Yeah.
say just saying, oh, here, just apply here. They want to hire veterans. That's
Right.
not helpful. So
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
totally
I
agree.
mean,
Totally agree.
we need to get accelerators into the market.
Mhm.
Right
Mhm.
now, we don't have I mean, we're churning them out as fast as we can. We've got a cohort of professional coaches getting ready to start class next week. We got just finished a group of professional coaches. So we're trying to do that in terms of putting informed helpers out into the market. But you and I have we're so familiar with this concept of the sea of goodwill, which is,
Mhm.
I mean, it's great that there's a sea of goodwill, but right now there's so much misinformation
Oh
that,
gosh.
and there's so much veteran centric perspective versus employer centric perspective that we're kind of going like this. So
Yep.
anyway, not to paint a picture of gloom and doom, because it isn't. There are solutions to these things. Let's get our advocates trained up properly. Let's get the
Mhm.
VSOs trained up properly so that they have the full picture,
Mhm.
not just
Absolutely.
a good intention, right?
Yeah, I mean, because we've
Um,
already said many, many times over that it is going to be a complicated process for the veteran, for the mill spouse, right? We know that, they should know that. But those that sign up to, like I said, support those veterans, that gap has to be remedied. It's got to be
Yeah.
remedied.
And part of it, I mean, not to start us off again, but like I do a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. So I have a weekly newsletter called the Veteran Success Blueprint that's very popular and gets it. We just had one go viral this week or last week, I should say. And there's so much defensiveness. Anything that I put out there to raise awareness as to the reality of the differences and how we need to work to fill that knowledge gap, it's often met with so much defensiveness on the part of veterans. So, for example, I was talking about how leading is different in the civilian world than it is in the military. And I gave an example in one of my posts about someone that, of a coaching client um, who was struggling. And several people came in and said, if that leader had value in the military, they're going to have value in the civilian world. So stop holding them back or telling them to hold themselves back. I'm like, whoa, dude, nobody
Hmm.
is saying that. But the economics are totally different. Value in the military is different. You need to learn the conversion rate.
Hmm.
Having
Yeah,
just come back
absolutely.
from overseas, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking. Anyway,
Yeah.
we should probably take this home, but that's kind of part of this MilSiv gap that I'm still seeing out there.
It's still
So,
there. You're right.
yeah.
You're right.
But
But
we're doing
yep,
our part. We're doing our part, Mike.
absolutely. And we could keep talking for hours and
Yes, we
hours on
can.
this, but yeah,
Good.
no, you're right. All right, listen, knuckleheads. All right, yes, I did. There's my Mike Wilbon reference. All right, but for everyone and for free, you obviously have the Accelerator podcast. As Emily talked about earlier, you've got the Veteran Success Blueprint newsletter on LinkedIn. Okay,
Free.
there's always good stuff on there, so please follow that. And then there's the Military Transition Interest Group on LinkedIn. It's got over 8,000 members. You can be part of the dialogue that Emily was just talking about.
Right.
Okay, so it's something pretty sweet. Okay, so
Yeah.
all right, so educate yourself by reading at ease, the guide to a smooth and successful military transition. Leverage the resources that we mentioned earlier. Join Emily's movement to do the right thing and do right by our veterans in this transition. And subscribe, like, and share our post. And for the God, love of God, please share this podcast with the community.
Yeah. And I just want to say to all of you folks out there who are in some phase of the military transition, know that you can own it and not be owned by it. And that is what Mike and I are all about. We're trying to empower you. And sometimes the information and the insight is maybe, hard to hear, but it's all in the spirit of empowering you to own your own transition because no one else is helping you own it right now, really. Um, so be well. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again.
Don't be dumb. Don't be dumb. All
Don't be
right.
dumb.
See y'all.
Bye.